Good morning. It's breakfast time for Type 40. This is new, isn't it? Yes, sir. Don't wake up with Type 40 as such. Well, you could be waking up. I don't know, depends on who you are, doesn't it? Depends on who you are and what you do. Yes, so if you are a sex worker, obviously, you might be getting home from work about now. Everybody else, I don't know, you could be rising and writhing, coping and seething, I don't know. Oh dear! What a morning to test out a breakfast stream here at Type 40 on the Type 40 and Rumble channels. Thought we'd have a casual chat. I brought a mate aboard as well. We're going to get into some bits and bobs, some nicks and some knacks. Myself and Anthony here. So we've been talking about doing this for a while, haven't we? Good morning, Anthony. Whose idea was this again? Was it yours or mine?
Good morning. I love the idea of a Type 40 breakfast show. So here I am. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, it could open up a whole thing, couldn't it? Breakfast show, drive time and space.
Yeah, I like it. I'm better in the morning. Sometimes on the Type 40 podcast, by the time we get to 11 o'clock, I'm hanging on in there. I'm definitely an early morning riser.
Say no more, my friends. Say no more. First thing in the morning or near enough. What's the weather like where you are? A bit of dew kicking around, is there? Bit of dew?
Definitely overcast. I think with the news this morning, I think it doesn't add to the to the feeling.
News?
Or
what
the
news?
Don't know any news, Dan. Haven't heard any news, to be fair. But yeah, overcast here where I am. Not good weather for going out. So good fun to chat with you. I've bought some props along. I've bought some old merchandise along. I've got an array of things kind of hiding under this shelf ready to chat with you.
Because in all sincerity, people have said to me since you've been on the show a few weeks now, they've said, oh, that guy, it's that guy. I like that guy. I recognise that guy. Tell us some more about that guy. And I thought, well, I think the best thing to do is to ask the guy, really, not me.
Yeah. And to be fair, Dan, my middle name is Guy, so there we go. I thought it was good to. I've loitered for the last couple of weeks on the Type 40 podcast, as I always said to you, Dan. I kind of loitered as a listener, as a viewer, over all the weeks and months that I have been. So it was nice to go on and do a show. I never thought I would be asked back to do another show, but here I am, 5 shows in, and this is the 6th. So I'm enjoying it. It's been great.
Well, we think you're great, and they do too. We've had several questions, because people do recognise your voice, your face, from various places. And, of course, the beauty of what we do, particularly on the live stream stuff, is it's all in real time. So we also get to know one another at the same time, really, in real time. There's not, but on those longer shows, those 2-3 hour shows, there's rarely space to sort of sit and to just sort of ask those more sort of casual questions. So we thought we'd choose the morning of the biggest event in the global political world. Look, the funniest thing, I mean, in all sincerity, we've got a lot of people in the States who watch and listen to Type 40 across various platforms. And I've always really admired Americans for how politically engaged that they are across generations. Anthony, I think we in Britain could learn a lot from them. The pride they take in casting their vote and their how can I put this? Their sense of national identity, and I suppose a kind of old school way of looking at the responsibilities of sort of that inheritance that's getting passed along. I think we've lost that a little in Britain. And regardless of where you placed your vote or what you believe, I think generally speaking, to all move forward together in a truly sort of in a properly progressive and further sighted way. That's got to be something to aspire to. I think we could learn a lot from the Americans in that respect in Britain. Can you hear me?
Hey, Dan, you're breaking up a little bit.
I'm breaking up a little.
I think that's my connection.
Look, the funniest thing that I've seen so far this morning concerning the election does come from the Doctor Who community, and a friend of ours, Bad Wilf himself, a podcaster, Martin Havel, asks. So he simply asked. So does Trump keep the same numbering, or is this like when David Tennant came back last year as a new incarnation?
Do you know what, Dan? He stole my thunder. I also saw that on Twitter this morning, or on X this morning, and I was going to ask you the exact same question. Where does Trump's re-election sit in the chronology? And I saw that you responded to that tweet, and I thought, damn, that's exactly what I was going in on. Where does he sit? But he doesn't get another go, does he? He doesn't get another turn. He gets 2 turns, and that's it now, isn't it? Right?
He doesn't get another regeneration cycle. No. But I mean, in all sincerity, when global events happen, and when major life events happen, actually to oneself, I often find that with Doctor Who fans, this is how idiosyncratic we are. We go to a Doctor Who reference, don't we? It's bizarre that it's the first place we go to, isn't it?
Yeah. A big global event like this. I was waking up on and off throughout the evening, checking my phone to see the results, watching on television. You're very aware of that. And then, as you say, the thing you go back to is David Tennant and the 60th anniversary specials. and which number is he? Yeah, I was caught up in that chronology. I think Doctor Who fans like to have everything just so, don't they? It has to sit into a nice pattern, and I am just as guilty as that. So I was thinking, where does he sit in that lineup? But he doesn't get, as you say, Dan, he doesn't get a new regeneration set. So that's it for him now.
This has all been. I mean, this leads us into the first thing I wanted to ask you about, really. This genuinely the comeback of David Tennant and the addition of war doctors, never mind fugitive doctors, but war doctors and all that kind of thing into the chronology does really rankle some Doctor Who fans. Simon Horton really, if you ask him about that subject, Simon's like a really easygoing person. He's not one for really getting up in his feels, even about Doctor Who. But he'll say, they've really screwed up the numbering of the doctors with this. Where do you stand on that?
Well, it's a good question, and I'd probably side with Simon on this one, because I think for a long time, as classic Doctor Who fans, and I kind of entrench myself in that position really, is that that first Doctor, William Hartnell, was locked in. That was the law. That was how we saw it. And then to have that readjusted and to make you rethink, you're either going to go one or two ways, aren't you, Dan? You're going to either be kind of really happy and think, oh, that helps the chronology, that adds to the mythology of the program, or you're going to go, oh, you're tampering with something that's best left alone. And I probably sit in that camp, probably alongside Simon with that one, because I feel so protective almost of those original 8 Doctors. There is much to love from the new series, of course, but I feel as though they're locked in and protected. So when you mess around with the chronology, you're sort of messing with my head a little bit. So I probably side with Simon.
It's never really bothered me one way or another, particularly when it's something like an anniversary. But when I think the fact is, on the surface, in the there and then, in the moment when the stories are coming out and things like that, I think, this is all fun. But then you realise you've got to kind of live with it we've got to live with it all after the fact. And so, I think about when my kids were growing up, and if you were trying to get a kid into it now, what I think my children responded to was the idea that one had followed another and followed another. It was something that they could follow, from 7 or 8 onwards. And that idea, what I was just talking about America in particular having that sense of legacy. I think we used to have that in Britain as well. We used to teach British and English and Welsh and Scottish history a lot more in schools, and the kings and queens of England, and people would learn them in sequence. My mother certainly was taught the kings and queens of England in sequence, and I think that the idea of having these doctors all in sequence, so-and-so followed so-and-so followed, in a simple way that children could follow and invest in and memorise too. They loved memorising it. And now it's out of sync. And I think that does. The fact that when somebody asks me how many, like you, I've been watching this all my life, 2 years. The fact that when somebody asks me, what doctor are we on now? What number? I have to go,
Exactly the same, Dan. I struggle, and so I think that, shooting out, well, which doctor is he? Sometimes when we're on the podcast and we chat and you put us on the spot or you ask us a question, which is great. You have to sort of do the numbers, don't you? Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I knew which doctor followed which doctor. I probably learned those kings and queens in order as well, Dan. To be fair.
Yeah.
It's messing with the canon a little bit, and I get it. It's good to do something new and to turn the show round on its head, to keep reinventing itself. I get that, but yeah, I do struggle with the numbers as well.
I suppose that the next question then is, which of these sods is to blame? Which of these fuckers who have we got to hunt down, and in what order? The truth. I think the truth of the matter is, I can't actually level blame at one person in particular, but I think the expansion of pop culture, and particularly sci-fi and fantasy franchises, and the sort of playing with ideas, the kicking balls around, I think sometimes people can get a touch carried away with it and forget that this is sort of entry-level stuff.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. And I've never been particularly into the world of Marvel, and what Disney is doing in terms of Marvel series and putting out a sequence that is out of order and out of sync. It makes it very difficult because I'm hot wired to like all this stuff, aren't I? A big science fiction geek, and I want to put I want to step into the water of Marvel and get involved. And then when I see the chronology and how each of these miniseries you get on Disney and how the films, it's like I haven't got that much time in my life to invest in all of that, and it really does turn me off. So Doctor Who was always in that very neat pattern. It didn't do that, but now I feel as though it fits more into that kind of Marvel world of different shows in different chronologies, and you don't quite know where to jump in and when to jump out.
Like something you've got to decipher.
It feels a bit like that. I like my television to kind of, that's why I've been enjoying, as we all probably have done, the season 25 box set, because you can watch it and it kind of, doesn't wash over you, but it kind of washes over you in that kind of nostalgic kind of, I don't know, that great way that Doctor Who kind of evokes. And when you have to think about it, when you have to sit down and think about the new series and think too hard about the plots, it's kind of where I start to turn off a little bit again. So, I mean, the season 25 box set has been a dream of, you don't have to try too hard, but you can be entertained.
Yeah. It's not as if even if you've seen these episodes dozens of times, hundreds, I think I probably have, even if you've seen these episodes all those many times, and I'll take this right the way up until probably the Russell T Davies early Stephen Moffat era, they never really wash over one, I don't think. There's, you can be in a happy place watching this stuff. That's different, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to try a bit harder, don't you? You have to try a bit harder, and I love my classic Doctor Who, where you can sit back with a cup of tea and a biscuit, and really enjoy it for what it is. And like you, Dan, I've watched them hundreds of times, and it's still enjoyable. I don't get that same, I haven't gone back and revisited lots of new Doctor Who. Again, I would be hot wired to kind of watch them over and over and over again. But I tend to default, when I want to watch Doctor Who, I tend to default back to classic. And there's only a very rare time that I would step into new Doctor Who to have that same level of entertainment.
To get your fix sort of. That's what it is, isn't it, with Doctor Who? We need to, however regularly we watch it, we reconnect with it. You've got to get your fix. If you're into a ritual of watching it every Saturday tea time, whether it's on the TV or not, you've got to get your fix. Say you're a classic series man.
Yes.
There's lots of different flavours just of the classic series, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure.
Where did you come in with the classic series, and have you got anybody you consider to be your Doctor?
Yeah. So Dan, my family always watched Doctor Who. My dad and my uncle, used to tell me stories about how they used to rush home from the football to make sure that they were back for Doctor Who, and they would be in one of those positions by which they felt, whether it was right or not, but they felt that they had seen every single episode as it had gone out. So I was hot wired into being put down in front of that television. So my earliest memory is probably the repeat of Planet of Spiders, just leading into Robot, because I can very distinctly remember John Pertwee, although I didn't know that then, John Pertwee lying on the floor with that cushion under his head and looking very unwell, and then suddenly before your eyes his face changes, and then this new man sits up, and that had a lot of appeal. And then just in a family of Doctor Who watchers, I guess. My cousin had the 1974 Doctor Who annual, with John Pertwee stood on the rocks from Planet of the Daleks. And
fabulous.
She wouldn't let me have it, Dan, but she would let me look at it. And I was desperate for this. She also had the Sugar Smacks badges, the 1970s John Pertwee program master, etc. She had all those, and I was desperate to have them. And she was a Doctor Who fan, so it was all that collecting, that kind of interest in Doctor Who was always there. And then I started recording them off the television using audio tape. So I was kind of locked in from quite an early age. We're probably talking about 6 or 7 years old when I had a play and record tape recorder that was just propped up in front of the television.
I did that too.
Was allowed to speak, and I would have to listen to them back again, and then wipe the tape, and then listen to the next one. I'll record the next one.
Oh, so much of that. I coveted the collectibles of other people in my life, like cousins and children of my mother's friends. You go around their houses and you'd see they'd got, like, say, an annual or a jigsaw, something that I'd never seen. There was a Dalek board game that's now I know what this Dalek board game that my sort of friend of a friend had got. I was mystified by this thing because it seemed impossibly ancient. The truth of the matter, it was only about 12 years old. But at the time, it seemed ancient and dusty. And I always wondered what it was. Of course, now I know what it was. I've seen it on various websites and things like that. I think David J. Howe's got it, and it's just part of a museum or something like that. And annuals, all manner of action figures and things like that. So I know exactly what you mean. And I too recorded, even because when VHS first came in, the cassettes were very, very expensive, certainly more than I could afford. So I still had to, even though we were early adapters to VHS, I still had to carry on recording them on audio tapes only for a good couple of years into my kind of serious fandom, which is early to mid 80s. These are experiences that we all had, aren't they? Disconnected, because we weren't connected. We couldn't go on our smartphones then and go, if you've got your audio, have you got your cassette player next to your telly ready? We were doing all these things completely, and it's in a kind of in secret almost. But certainly, I never told people at school about it that I was doing this. Bear with me, folks. I think we're having trouble with the signal a little again. So, okay, I think we've had a few problems with the signal, Anthony, but I think what it is that we generally have similar experiences, whether we can share them with one another or not. I'm going to, before we get too deep into anything else, I'm going to head over to the live chat now, because we have fellow friends, fans and companions with us this morning. Let's see what they've got to say, see how awake they are. If they're not awake yet, I know what'll liven them up. Always does the trick for me. Thanks, Shooty. I think who's joined us there in the live chat. Let's go and find out. We have Stephanie Barrett again. She's there from Hobart in Tasmania, where it's 8:30 p.m. A better time for me than your lunchtime ones. So yeah, I do lunchtime slots as well. Eating my toast and Weetabix whilst watching, says Woodhouse122. We're helping people digest their fibre. Got to be a good thing, isn't it? Stephanie says, we just had a 29 degrees Celsius day here, our warmest day since March. Oh, bloody hellfire. It's getting parkier by the day here, isn't it, Anthony? Parkier by the day.
Stephanie, I'd love some 29 degrees just for a morning. It would be great. I could open up these doors behind me, but they're firmly closed. It's freezing.
Your breakfast, my super potato. Hello from Australia. My supper potato, sorry. Super potato. My eyes aren't working properly, Doug. Good to see you, pal. A morning call from Rob Alexander. And we're Woodhouse122s. And again, the new special editions of the season 25 stories were a great watch. Those box sets are amazing. So Woodhouse is well into that. And Stephanie asks, please stop showing that clip, Dan. Please stop. It's to wake me up as much as anything else. So that's the modern media, Anthony. We've got TikTok, we've got twerking, we've got this new wave of celebrity. But I think never mind new wave. I'm happy with an old point, courtesy of Tom Baker here, pointing the way back into the distant past there. But sincerely, you talk about your early fandom. There's a sense of kinship that I feel when you recount all that. I think, yeah, this guy, we're kind of brothers from another mother. I feel that already. But no, I mean, sincerely, when you and I come into contact, mutual friends sent us our details to one another, didn't they? That's the general lay of the land. So when we got into contact, you sent me a clip of an appearance that you'd made on a mainstream TV show, didn't you? Several years ago now. Do you remember which one it was?
Yeah, I do, Dan. It was kind of my pitch to kind of come on and do a show with you. I'd found this clip on YouTube of me on the One Show, and with the One Show was talking about collectibles and talking about an auction that was happening at Bonham's for Doctor Who props and memorabilia.
That's it.
So I happened to tell the One Show, because they got in contact with me. I happened to tell the One Show that I had a TARDIS in my back garden. And they said, oh, great, we can do the show from there. So I said, oh, great. I didn't really understand the enormity of a live television broadcast, or a broadcast, that they were saying was live, was going to take to record and to film. So literally people were walking in and out of my house for hours before the show, pulling cables through. There were people chatting to me and getting me ready, and people talking about scheduling and everything. The neighbors opposite thought that I had murdered somebody, because I don't quite know why they went to that bit first, but they thought that I had uncovered something, because suddenly these vans with satellite dishes were parking up in the road. I live in quite a quiet, secluded, suburban road, and the neighbors were twitching, the curtains were twitching. Suddenly these
I thought there was something about him, his eyebrows too close together,
Yeah, all of that, Dad. These massive thick cables coming through the house, and thinking, oh my goodness. And then as you saw from the start of that show, that Alex, the presenter, then does a little introduction from outside the TARDIS, which was the front of my shed. I kept saying to them, if you film it directly on, it will look like a whole box. If you do it at the side, it will look like a facade. And of course it looks like a facade. Anyway, so then later on in that afternoon, we recorded some stuff here with some props. And the hope was, I went to that auction, but I was never very prepared for how much all of that stuff was going to go for, especially when you added on Bonham's auctioneering costs, etc. I was after a chance.
People overseas won't realise how big a deal the One Show is. It may only be half an hour on a weeknight, but it's a big production that a lot of people, I mean, okay, a lot in 2024. What is a lot? 2 million, 3 million? I don't know. But a lot of people watch this, and it must be quite an intense experience, particularly if you're not somebody who's been put there by a management team as part of a circuit in the way that a couple of actors would be. This is in your home, and even though you've got a lot of media experience, it must have still been a bit of a culture shock.
Oh yeah, Dan. Yeah, I mean, I was being pulled everywhere. It's like, come up and record this little bit now. Oh, right, go back downstairs. We're not ready for you. Right, go back upstairs. And moving furniture around in my house, all these props and bits and pieces that I'm lucky enough to have collected. Being shunted around and pushed around so that they could get the best shot, which is
Get what
what
they
appears
needed.
on the one show. So yeah, I mean, it was a great opportunity. It was one of many, because at one point in my life, and this is possibly where people recognize me from, I was the press and publicity spokesman for the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, which I did from 2001 to at least the time that Matt Smith had left. So I probably did it for about 10 years. So I was grateful to the Appreciation Society for the opportunity, but equally I was publicizing the Appreciation Society as well. So it was kind of, that's why I was appearing. It wasn't necessarily just for me, it was about the Doctor Who Appreciation Society and publicizing that.
Because it was either you or Toby Haydock who would turn up on mainstream TV. They'd usually get, hi Toby if you're watching, but they'd usually get him in when people had snuffed it. You got to do the nicer stuff.
I absolutely did. They used to call me One Take Wayner at the BBC. They used to say, "Oh, we'll always rely on you because you'll just rock up and you'll do it in one take, and you'll be gone." I did many stories, Dan, but one that immediately springs to mind was when Sky News wanted to do a piece on the Doctor Who stories being shown at the BFI. So one story a month through the anniversary,
Oh
through
yeah,
the
yeah.
50th anniversary. So they got me to London on a train. So I got to Paddington, and they said, somebody will be waiting for you. So I see my name on a sign when I go to the taxi rank. I'm picked up in a car of which I'm put in the back. The driver doesn't speak to me because there's some kind of etiquette and courtesy, I guess, from most drivers. Like, oh, I don't know who I've got in the back here. I'll just keep driving. So there was me happy to chat and say about the weather, but he was having none of it. This black car went all the way to Sky Studios, and I did a broadcast live for them about an unearthly child that was being shown at the BFI. It was a crazy time.
And during those years, at post-millennium, I think there was a watershed mark around 1999-2000. Once Doctor Who had won that Auntie Award as being the show that the British public wanted to see come back the most, to rematerialise like that. Once that had happened, it almost seemed inevitable that Doctor Who was going to come back. I mean, I remember in 2001, people still used to tease me a little. Some of my friends used to tease me a little about, that show you love, it's been over years, it's never coming back, and all this sort of thing. But the watershed mark for me was when Crossroads come back. And I said to them, look, if Crossroads can come back, which was the one TV series that it was more popular to take the piss out of than Doctor Who, it was Crossroads. If Crossroads can come back, I'm damn certain that Doctor Who could. And I knew that it was only a matter of time from that moment on. But during those years, like you say, 2001 up until 2013, 2014, that must have been like, even you being on the outskirts of it, being the guy they call like the bloody A-team, it must have felt like being in the eye of some sort of storm, because there was something new going on all the time. And Russell T Davies, being really, really slick with the media then, made sure that it remained in the spotlight even during the months that it wasn't on.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. As you're talking, I'm recounting in my head all those various experiences, because it felt like I was either on the radio or on the television representing the Doctor Who Appreciation Society. an awful lot, particularly around the, we could talk lots about this, but I mean, around the Daleks coming back or not coming back, there was always a bit of a media talking point.
Is
Who's
David Morrissey really the next Doctor, or is he not? All that stuff.
Oh, is Bill Nye? We won't go there again because we went through this on one of the shows. But will Bill Nye be the Doctor? A big faux pas. However, skate along, skate along. Yeah, or even to the point where when's it going out? What day is it going out? What time's it going out? The Doctor Who had reignited the public's imagination for this television program, and it was getting into fine detail. And you just had to make sure that you didn't give away anything, but also you didn't give an official statement about it because you weren't the official states. You weren't in the place to give that official statement.
Had it reignited something in you, or had that always been there during the wilderness years, and this was just an extension of how you were feeling anyway?
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to get a ticket for the Paul McGann television movie long before I got associated with the DWAS. So I was always a fan at that point of the wilderness, and then going to watch that at the BFI on a big screen after having not had any Doctor Who for 5 or 6 years. This was a real treat, and I felt that this was the start of a brand new series for Doctor Who. I thought this was, like many of us thought, that it was going to be the start of a brand new series, but of course fate dealt its hand, and we didn't get a Paul McGann series.
The peaks and troughs and the slings of and arrows of being a Doctor Who fan throughout the 80s and the 90s in particular. Things may be, it's tough in the trenches out there now, particularly if one has an X account. But I think Facebook's going downhill again as well. Back then it had its own traumas, didn't it? And you kind of had to manage your fandom a little bit and be careful as to what you'd confess.
Yeah, agreed, Dan. And I know, again, we've talked about this on the shows, but the DWB, the Doctor Who Bulletin, was that main source of information for
indispensable.
Me.
Yeah,
indispensable. And it was also giving me a message about what I was to like and not like. So in those the heyday of Doctor Who Bulletin, in those late 80s, where I hadn't seen or heard any Patrick Troughton stories, DWB was leading me to understand that these were the black and white years were the best years of Doctor Who's life, and what I was watching now in the late 80s was not as good. And I sort of fell for that rhetoric, and I sort of fell for that a little bit. It's only when you got to see them and you were able to make your own mind up, were able to make your own mind up. But
it's very easy to lament about things that we can't see. You have to take people's word for it, don't you?
Yeah, and it was a big voice. So you kind of, without X, without Twitter, without Facebook, without that opportunity to, like you said at the beginning, Dan, we have every single episode of Doctor Who in our phone, don't we? By some means.
Yeah.
This wasn't the case in the 80s. This was waiting for DWB to land through the letterbox and land on the map.
Going on to television and talking about Doctor Who, I mean, a lot of people would kind of dream about the television, radio, all that kind of thing. I mean, anybody can have a platform now, of one size or description or another that either suits you or channels your creativity or fits your way of life, however you want to look at it. But the opportunity to speak about Doctor Who to an audience who, I mean, in the case of when it's broadcasting, they can't answer back. But to an audience that isn't going to roll their eyes, because it was so desperately unfashionable for an extended period of time, wasn't it? And yet, I never cared. Did you?
No. Not in the slightest. I was going to conventions. I could hear what my friends were saying about Doctor Who because there was that perception that Doctor Who was limping home in those last couple of years of its life. It never bothered me, Dan, particularly, and it never bothered me when it came back, because then it was reignited and rejuvenated, and it was looking so much different, more different than it had done. So no, it was never a problem for me. Yeah, I always loved Doctor Who. I will continue to love Doctor Who. So no, it was never a problem.
Do you find that it's been this sort of constant companion through your adult life there, but through your whole life?
Yeah, to be fair, as we were saying right at the start, me, propping up a tape recorder next to a television, trying to capture these audio moments because we didn't have a video recorder until 1985. So, it was a long old haul of audio recordings. And I can listen to some of those audio recordings back, and you hear a 6 or 7 year old or 8 or 9 year old me going, shh, shush, shush to my sister because you wanted to capture for in its purity, if you like, without any interference.
Turning
So
the dials, flicking the switches,
yeah,
or a bit like this, really.
a lot like that, Dan, to be fair. Although my black and white television had an audio line in and out, so this helped. Moving forward, it became a bit more sophisticated.
Incorporating the series into our lives. I mean, it's one thing to try and rope other people into our fandom, and and to rope them into our conversations and our obsessions. But as you say, to incorporate it into our lives and our homes, I think it's not unique to Doctor Who fans. I think football fans do that. I think people who are keen anglers do that, or cross stitchers. I know a lot of cross stitches. Particularly the silver tops who will finish a cross stitch and they'll get it framed and put it up somewhere. I think that's quite a common thing. But when it comes to Doctor Who, as you say, when you've got even a half-sized Dalek, never mind a full-sized Dalek, in one's home, all those kinds of things, prints of various descriptions, and you own a couple of props and things like that, don't you? So, how did you go about acquiring items like that? Because for example, I'm not the kind of person who would ask an actor for an autograph. This is not in any kind of snooty way. It's just I just never, my mind never goes there. But so when people are autograph hunters, they hang around outside stage doors to get David Tennant to sign something or other, or Catherine Tate, or Sarah Sutton, or anybody. I think it's nice, but I never do that. And to me, it's the same with the props. It's like I've never. I'll look at them and oh wow, that's great. I'll go and see them, but I've never had the compulsion to own them. But you did, and you do, don't you?
Yeah, I do, and I still do, because there is something like you just going back to what you just said, Dan, about this being the symphony of my life.
Yeah.
Doctor Who. Then the opportunity to own something that was on that screen at that time, there's something that draws me to that. So I've started to think about collecting props and costumes around favorite stories, that kind of sucked me in when I was a viewer. Wouldn't it be nice to have? I've got something here, Dan, to show you.
Yeah.
This is a very squidged helmet of Theron.
I know that anywhere. My God.
I'm not going to even attempt to put it on, but in the series, in the Leisure Hive, in those particular episodes, I always felt that this was the most majestic piece. That this was made of
extraordinary
metal
on screen.
Yeah, and it was like old, and there was something kind of quite exciting about the Leisure Hive anyway. But there was something
that
quite
sense of newness that it had.
Yeah, and then when you finally track one of these down, because there were various of there was the stone one that was in the chamber, or stone-looking one that was in the chamber, but then there was the multiple props for the multiple Tom Baker Doctors to wear. This plastic, literally plastic, squished plastic, looks better from that angle, doesn't it?
Because on screen it looks almost Arthurian, like something from John Borman's Excalibur movie or something.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I see it, Dan, and that's how I saw it at the time. So, to have this and the robe, which I've got as well, there's something quite that draws me to that, to say, well, actually, I've got one of those things that was actually seen in the Leisure Hive. There is other things. I bought one more prop down with me, Dan. See if anybody can recognize this. Again, from favorite stories.
Oh.
It may not be everybody's favorite story, but
oh my word!
I thought I would bring that one down today.
Wow, that would be Clive Merrison's cap, would it, from Paradise Towers?
Well, I did a little bit of research, Dan, for this, and I looked in the complete history. So don't blame me, blame the complete history. There were 8 caretakers other than the 2 lead
Oh,
caretakers.
of course. Yeah.
So I'm guessing there's no name in this one. So I'm guessing that it's one of those 8 as opposed to the 2
Yeah.
lead caretakers, if you
I
like.
suppose so. Yeah. Oh, it's fabulous. I mean, oh God. Yeah. See, I love looking at this stuff. I do.
Yeah. But there's something. I mean, I love Paradise Towers. I think it's great, and I think Paradise
It's
Towers
growing on me.
is grown on people. And since the Series 24 box set, I think it's grown in its kind of popularity, which I kind of like. I always liked it when it went out. I particularly like it now. So to own a caretaker outfit, I've never put it on, Dan. These outfits I've never walked around the house in them. That's where my
Go to the paper shop. Good
yeah,
morning.
yeah, just as a caretaker. That's where my interest stops. But it's nice to have those bits and pieces, I guess.
It's lovely. I mean, how did you decide that? I mean, because obviously somewhere like Bonhams, they publish, don't they, catalogues of the things that they've got coming up to auction. Do you sort of ring it and think, "Oh, I'll go for that"?
Yeah, well, I did, and that was the one show program, Dan. I was going for the Chancery Guard costume. It still eludes me. So if anybody's watching wants to make a couple of quid, I'll have the hat. But yeah, some things still elude me. But I don't want props of everything. I just think it's about props and costumes and memorabilia. I mean, memorabilia, Dan. When you were talking about memories. Who still has this in their home?
Let's have a closer look. I've seen reproductions of these, but this does look like it is an original. You can tell.
Yeah, it's mine. It was. So there was always an obsession down here, wasn't there? Of why would a 6-year-old child want to keep an old box, a tatty old box?
Yeah.
And try and look, some great illustrations at the side.
They're beautiful.
And the back. I mean, you see a lot of these on eBay, but that's
Race through space with Weetabix. We've got a couple of questions for you in the live chat. Rob Alexander asks, is that the prop, the helmet there, in the recording of the Leisure Hive that Tom throws down, Tom Baker, great Tom Baker, threw down in anger? Did you know?
Yeah, well, I've seen the studio recording. I know what Rob's talking about. It's on the season 18 box set, and he flings the prop in anger, doesn't he? And says something about a jury effing prop. I don't know, Rob, if that's the actual one. I'd like to think it was, because it is quite battered and bruised. But I can't say for sure.
Oh, God. Rose Kirby asks, hey, Anthony and Dan, it's great to remember all of these doctors. Do you get prints or something else? So do you get something? Have you got framed items in your home? You got something that you put on? Because I see you. Is that the War of the Worlds you've got behind you there in your room?
Yeah. So this is my lounge. I've got all of my kind of geeky stuff hidden upstairs, Dan, in a room upstairs in my house.
See, with the War of the Worlds, because so many people bought that album, you can kind of got plausible deniability there, haven't you? It's a big album. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is a movable piece, this one, but to answer Rose Kirby's question, I like to collect frame prints or framed originals of the maybe we could do this another time. I could show you, but
it's funny how time flies when you do these, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing. I've got I like the advertising posters, so I like all the Longley advertising advertisements, the Blackpool for the exhibitions there. I love framing those and collecting the kind of adverts associated with Doctor Who. So I got a number of the Target book ones, just because that's a little bit more quirky than I love the prints.
Well, those things, they were our as fans, they were our interface between us and the series, weren't they? In many respects, things like that would turn up in the local WH Smiths or on the counters in shops, or if you'd go to, I don't know, some sort of exhibition space, you'd see lots of those things. So I'm the same. I've got flyers for even though I never went to it, I've got the flyers for the Ultimate Adventure. But I've got the John Pertwee and Colin Baker ones. I never went to see it.
Exactly that. That's the kind of things. I don't know if you can remember. There was on London Tubes. There was a Museum of the Moving Image in the 90s, a Doctor Who exhibition. And I would look at that poster thinking, oh, flipping heck, how'd you get that out of the hoarding, in the tube without somebody finding you? I'd look up and I'd be with friends and they'd go, Anthony, leave it. I was like, oh, I'm desperate for that. I want that. I had to buy it on eBay in the end. Obviously, I didn't steal it from a tube, but that was my.
I had a similar experience. I mean, the nearest I've got is becoming a nuisance. You talked about the TV movie earlier on. By 1996, I thought I think I'd got to the point where I'd considered that Doctor Who might have closed out, and then it all ignited for a brief period, and I was determined to get absolutely everything, and I certainly grabbed everything I saw, and for a long time until I met Kenny Smith. Hello, Kenny. I thought I'd got everything connected with the TV movie. I hadn't. But I bought everything that I saw, which is kind of what counts, isn't it? But the one thing I'd seen that I was sort of wasn't within my grasp, that I couldn't buy, were posters in the local HMV. And God, did I pester the staff there. How long are those posters going to be up? What do you do with those posters when you take them? Don't you just throw them away? That kind of thing. Well, I'm in here most days, and because I worked just up the road from my local HMV. And yeah, I was there. They couldn't get shot of me. You could tell it was just give him the posters, and then we'll never hear of this again. And so I've got 2 of the HMV ones rolled up. I did have one of them framed in a room in my home for a while before I became a dad, and I had to, my baby had to have the spare room. Bloody hell! But I've still got them. There. But it's a similar thing. I had to have it. Even though HMV insisted on putting a staple in every corner to put it where they needed to. Once it became into my possession, I cherished it, and there's never.
Yeah, there's something great about collecting all of that, isn't there, Dan?
I think so.
There was a spa opposite the school where I used to go, and in the early 70s, that I was found on the floor. So my mum was paying for the groceries in the spa, and I was 5. So I was 5 years old. I was found on the floor opening up Weetabix boxes. We were talking about Weetabix boxes,
Really?
Trying to get the card figures out of all the boxes, not making the connection. You had to buy the Weetabix to get the cards. I was just quite happily opening up packets to see if and the lady ran over. She said, "Oh no, you mustn't do that." And then she scampered upstairs, and she brought back down the cardboard box where all the Weetabix boxes were in.
Oh, what they call the outer. Yeah,
the outer. And she then had spares for the kids that opened up a packet and said there was no cards in. She had the box with spares that they'd bunged in. If only I'd known. If I'd, the 50-year-old me would have gone to that woman. Can I have that outie box, please? because I can remember that looking really kind of like a red or blue imprint of the cereal boxes. People that collect these things, David J. Howe will know better than I, but I can distinctly remember, the outer box that was. I would have had that as well, to be fair.
Fabulous. We've got another couple of comments here in the live chat, and Darren Bradley, obviously he's just starting his day as well, but he's off to the prop gallery office later this afternoon. That's the CEO of the prop gallery that's in the picture there with him. So he says. So he's off to the prop gallery office to be surrounded by Sutek's head, the giant fly from the Green Death, Alpha Centauri's head, along with a BBC Triffid and a tripod. So that's a hell of a morning at the office, isn't it?
That's an amazing morning. Yeah. And it always surprises me, Dan, how many of these things survive and how far back you can go. On eBay, at the moment, I think there's a Marshman head from Full Circle. Who religiously held onto that. It's not for me, that one. But
Simon Horton, you got to get over there, mate.
Well, he's loving that Leisure Hive gown that's on there at the moment too. So.
Oh, he's here. Good morning, Simon. Fantastic to see. Anthony's props, says Simon. Oh, God. Thank you for sharing, he says.
Yeah, I know Simon's love of the Leisure Hive, and I was only prepared to show the helmet of Theron when he wasn't around, but he's lurking in the background, so he's anyway.
The poster stories as well have also triggered Darren Bradley. He says, I still have a 6-foot-long Tomb of the Cybermen poster from 1991. They're beautiful, painted poster. Was that an Andrew Skeletor? Or was it? I think it was, wasn't it?
It could well be, Dan. Yeah, could well be. I'm not sure, but it's great.
I thought it was either Andrew or Colin Howard, but I'm pretty sure it's one of Andrew's.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have that one.
Morning, also Simon. Good morning, Simon. Greetings all, says the Peter Venkman fan site. Always great to see a fellow Ghostbuster strapping on his pack. Particularly, I was going to say particularly this time in the morning, but I think that this person is overseas. No, says Simon. If I'd have realised he was free, I'd have invited him as well. So have you got your eye on anything in particular now, or do you just sort of stalk eBay on the daily? You know, I've got things that I've got in my like watch list, and then sort of nicks and knacks, really, bits and pieces. But
yeah, I do.
Props for Doctor Who stuff.
I do, Dan. Not so much a prop, but a collectible. A couple of weeks ago on the Thursday show, we talked about the Shooty and Millie Gibson 5-inch action figures.
We did,
and we started talking about the details and the packaging and all of those things. And I feel as though it's the packaging that was always the thing that drew me into, not so much the props, but into the collectibles. And it started with this one. This is the 1974 or 75 perhaps, the action figure for Tom Baker's Doctor.
I love that.
And I said on that show that the Doctor always needed an enemy to play with, so there's the proof. So these were mine originally. I kept them from the 70s, but
beautiful
that's
condition.
my love of Doctor Who collectibles is the packaging, and that's why still collecting action figures now as I do. I just like the Shooty and the Millie Gibson. Whatever you think about the series going on, I think the packaging is really nice, and it's very for me it's kind of quite attractive to display and show. So although Millie and Gibson wouldn't sit next to that Tom Baker action figure, it necessarily, in my head, in terms of collecting, I would put them in. I have cabinets where I can display this stuff. I like to look at it because I don't feel as though, if you're collecting it should be kept in boxes where you can't see it. I like to have it out on display.
I've been guilty of that, but I've got over it now. Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel as though it's there to be. So I try and rotate cupboards around and cabinets around so that I can just enjoy this stuff. Only I could enjoy it. It's a shame because I'd like lots of other people to enjoy it too. Like David J. Howe's museum. I haven't been to it yet, but he's opened up his collection, hasn't he, on certain days for people to go and view.
As I understand.
Yeah,
very generous. Very generous.
Yeah, amazing, because there's some great products and there's some great packaging, as I say. The 60s Dalek artwork on some of those toys and games and jigsaws, is really good. It evokes those memories of kind of 1960s science fiction serials. It makes you. There's something warming about that I quite like.
And I understand that, not compulsion as such, but that instinct to and the way that you relate to not just collectibles, but memorabilia as well, of things that are attached to the kind of the commercial life of the series, the brand, the characters, the iconography. That really does chime with me. I'm the guy who's got, for the things that I haven't got, like cereal boxes and things like that, I've got plenty of old copies of the Radio Times and cuttings from this and cuttings from that, and whole issues of, if ever it appeared in TV Times or an actor appeared, I'd keep that as well, or the Sunday magazine, the News of the World, all manner of things like that nobody else, well, I'm sure somebody else did keep them, but nobody else within reason would keep them. And I still do the same now to a limited extent. And I think that now, in the 2020s, where what they call the culture war that's continually kind of raging, and kind of, I think it's kind of pissing in the pool quite a lot of something that we all enjoy. It's pissing in a pool that we all swim in, basically. And I think now and again it's good to sort of purify the waters, and to talk about all this sort of stuff and to put it back into sort of real terms. that certainly Doctor Who fandom has always thrived on is the idea that we don't pursue our interest of the series in any kind of passive way. We don't just watch the show and then detach from it. It becomes part of our lives. We become part of it. That's when the series is working properly. It's this kind of, it's almost like its own ecosystem, really. And that's not, arguably it's not happening at the moment to the best of in the way that it could be. But I think the fandom, people such as us, and younger people too, if we continue to do our bit, I think the philosophy is that eventually the program makers will cotton on again. That this is kind of how it's supposed to. It's how it's supposed to work, and going too corporate with something like Doctor Who, I think that Star Wars and things like that, they're different animals, really. I think they've always been so huge, whereas the homespun quality of Doctor Who means that it's kind of essential to its life's blood, really, that the fan base is in there, in the mix, in the thick of it.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. And as you said at the beginning of the show, we were talking about a certain election in America and we were trying to give numbers to presidents, and it's the same connection, isn't it? It's what were you doing on this day and is there an association? So as I always laugh on the show when we do the live shows on the Thursday, I always say, ask me what I did yesterday and I would have to think about it. Ask me where I was the night that Deadly Assassin episode 4 and what was the weather like. I could probably bring that back into existence in my head because, Doctor Who has been the symphony of my life, and it creates memories at certain points, happy and sad memories. I can remember my sister and my nephew watching Doctor Who when it came back with David Tennant and having that Saturday feeling again. And then when my sister passed away, it was never quite the same, but you can remember the episode where she was particularly unwell, for example, and so it's happy and sad memories of watching certain episodes of Doctor Who. And I think it just, it just won't go away. It will be our last thoughts, Dan, won't it? It will be our last memories to go.
The stitches of our own lives and existences. I'm the same as well with 80s Doctor Who and noughties Doctor Who in particular. Just as you said, and you can say, well, that sounds like quite a sad story, but I don't think it is. I don't think it is at all. I think it's perfectly natural. Other people. I was also really into music for a long time, so I would kind of do the same with whatever was number one. That time I would associate with events in my life. I think it's no different, no better, no worse. It's just how it is.
Yeah, I would agree. I've got one thing to show, Dan. Another thing here. So if we have a look at this, so this is the Doctor Who lecture set.
I remember these.
So this is the original. Ask me what I did last Easter. Haven't got a clue. Remember an Easter in the 70s when an aunt comes down to stay at home, to stay at a family home, and then brings you this as a gift. I can tell you what I could tell you what I was doing that particular Friday. It's those kind of memories. Of somebody giving you this. I can remember and I've still got and cherish, if you like.
That's wonderful. I so wish I'd still got mine, those transfer, because I think part of me would like a pristine one that I never rubbed, but I would like the ones now that I use. I've got some, but not many. We've got Christopher Lewis in the live chat who simply says a flex. It's a flex.
For the letter set.
Rob Alexander says, I have several hundred magazines, largely Radio Times, but a real cross-section of topics. It's 5 a.m. on the East Coast for the Peter Venkman fan site, and yet they're still here listening to us going on and on about this.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for the people listening in. When we talked about doing this show, Dan, I didn't think anybody would be wanting to hear those stories, but it is those stories that bind us all together, isn't it? It is those threads that make Doctor Who fandom. And I think, certainly Type 40 podcast has made me talk about Doctor Who more in the last 6 weeks than I probably have in the last 6 years.
Is that a good thing?
I'm very grateful because it's reignited a bit of a passion, to be fair.
The sleeping giant, well, the sleeper has awoken, Sarah. Tom from T Dwarf Productions, he's up as well, and he says, "Hi, Anthony. Let me know what monster you want." So I think he's offering to make you a monster.
Oh, and we saw some of those in the Halloween special, didn't we? Which
That's
were
right.
amazing. So those, Tom, thank you so much. I'll need to have a think, because there are so many, and your work is amazing. So thank you. I'll let you know on a Thursday for
He
sure.
puts us on the spot, doesn't he? He puts us on the spot. It's not quite a life size waxwork, but it's still extraordinary. The work of Tom.
I have to say though, Dan, I'd be very interested. Maybe this is the one I want, Tom. I'd love to see Tom do a Candyman, because with season 25 very much in my head, we haven't had a Candyman anything, have we? Eagle Moss has not gone there, I don't think, and 5-inch figures have certainly not gone there, I think. So Tom, I think maybe I'd love to see you have a go at the Candyman. I think that would be great.
Yeah, there you go, Tom. That's hell of it. That's a challenge and a half, isn't it? Darren Bradley says there's something about vintage packaging in their artwork, whether it's Palatoy's Action Man, Evil Knievel, Dennis Fisher's Mouton, Cyborg and Android, the Dukes of Hazzard, TCR Racetrack, even Ideals Kaplunk. Yeah, I agree. All of those things, Darren. I'm exactly the same. I think it's because I saw a lot of these things on shop shelves. The stuff that I didn't own, I had some of those things, but not all of them. But there's plenty that I didn't, and it was going to the shop, seeing it all lined up, or seeing the Marshall Ward catalogue twice a year, every Christmas, and picking out things that I'd want that's from Santa, or all that kind of stuff. It's all part of the memories of that time, of a childhood, and a particular, I suppose, some wave of culture in Britain as well. So it was sort of downstream from the American markets. Now that we know what happened there with like the G.I. Joe action figure line became Action Man here and things like that. But it was still a lower level phenomena, I suppose. Yeah. It meant just as much to us.
Yeah, agreed, Dan. And I think, we had a message come up about talking about Radio Times and collecting Radio Times. There's something kind of quite nice about looking through an old Radio Times and trying to remember some of the programs that were shown on certain days and certain times. There's that reminiscence, isn't there, about that, which I think is a lot about the reason why I collect this, because my childhood was very happy. I was in a good, happy place. It reminds me of very happy times, sort of very happy family times. And I think there is that connection, isn't there?
In the same way, I believe in the same way that music does. It is the reason why. I mean, do they still have jukeboxes in some pubs? I think they do, or what would you call them? Like bars, theme pubs, and things like that. You still do see them, but it's all about sort of bringing up an old memory. And when you can do that, if you're into Doctor Who, you can do that by moving across your shelf or opening up a drawer. Then it's a similar kind of sensation, really. You've been able to sort of time travel for oneself, even if it's just for an hour here or there. Simon Horton says Tom has made a Candyman, and it was incredible. So maybe I've seen that and forgotten about it. If so, Tom, I do apologise, but we'll have to make sure that we get the picture. Yeah. We'll get the picture, send it to you, Anthony, and we will surprise you with it on a further show. Darren says, I was in Action Transfers at Calcutos, man. I still have the Doctor Who set to, I don't know what Calcutos is. Anyone recall the Viewmaster versions of State of Decay and Castrovalva? I had Castrovalva. We've got to wrap up now, sadly, Rob, but we'll have to return to this topic and these things, bring you back on either for a breakfast or a lunchtime or whatever for one of these chats again, because people want to know more, they want to hear more. I certainly like to know more about your love of Doctor Who that has stretched throughout your entire life, and get some more of those experiences as well. Yeah, those unique experiences there at the time when the series was at the height of its popularity too, from that perspective of being the guy that they would call. That would be great as well. Thank you to everybody who's been watching this. It's I mean, you could go out and touch grass, couldn't you? But there's a lot of dew out there, even at this time in the morning. So I can see. Well, I think you're better off in with us, aren't you? And Rob's boasting. He says, my Radio Times collection. because my grandmother used to give me her previous week's edition. We used to go and see her on Saturday afternoon in the 70s, and Doctor Who was a big part of all that. So again, Rob is tied to his grandmother through the Radio Times, which is tied to Doctor Who. It's completely intangible.
Yeah, agreed. And Rob, I would share that memory. There is links to 1981. We've coming up for an anniversary of the Five Faces of Doctor Who, but running home from school every evening over 4 evenings in that week, and to my grand's house, because that's where my parents used to pick me up, was just is a memory that's entrenched of sitting watching the Crotons with her, of all stories to choose.
I'd like to think that this is something that's still going on now. I think it's very easy for us to look at the current era, the current pop culture landscape, and think things are very, very different now, and therefore they are worse. And TV Doctor Who isn't as popular as it once was, and therefore this won't happen. But this is, I think, when I look back to the late 80s, where the series was a punchline, and yet we now see McCoy's stories coming out on Blu-ray, and we find out that that we weren't alone. You with your caretaker's cap there, that people like you and I weren't alone, and the experience may have been smaller, but it was just as special to some people, just very different. It'll be interesting to see where the history books stand with all of this, where it all lines up, and obviously the ebb and the flow of Doctor Who will doubtless continue as it does, as the seasons do change. Speaking of which, we're deep into the autumn here at Type 40 with all our coverage across audio and video here, with a various assortment of fellow friends, fans and companions and panellists, the latest of which to join us has been Anthony Weiner. It's been great to get to know you a bit more over this last hour, but this has been well over an hour already. Time does fly, doesn't it?
It's been great. We always said we'd just do an hour, but we've overrun already, Dan. So it's lovely to sit and reminisce. It's very lovely to reminisce with you, Dan, and share some memories and some stories, and hopefully some of those things evoke some memories for people who are watching too.
Thank you so much, because we know you're out of commission on Thursdays for a couple of weeks, so we won't be seeing you at Type 40 Live for the time being, but hopefully we'll get you back on for another one of these. Come and have some more conversations. For everybody else out there, yes, of course, Type 40 Live Thursday from 8 p.m. UK time, Rumble, X, YouTube and Facebook for that. Come and join us in the comments. We've got lots to talk about, plenty to get into, the good, the bad and the ugly, as always. So you can chill out for the rest of the day if you're so inclined, or if you're lucky. But we'll be back with more of the cut and the thrust for a monster Type 40 Live Thursday from 8 p.m. Even if we are Anthony-less, we'll have the Doctors and the Companions, the Monsters, and all the news for you. News, views, rants and raves, as always. Yes, Anthony, thank you again for disclosing what you have this time. I think there's probably more to tell. You game for more?
Yeah, I think so, Dan. Some stories to share, perhaps.
Excellent stuff. So, we'll see you in the comments. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40, whatever the day, whatever the weather. You enjoy the rest of your day. We'll speak to you all again soon. Bye-bye. Cheers, Anthony.
Thank you.